Good afternoon, and welcome to our afternoon hearings. Today, for our afternoon hearing, we are joined by both folks from DEP and DCNR to have a conversation about the budget request for both departments. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, do you have any introductory comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris. Very quickly, welcome Secretary Shirley, Secretary Dunn, and your respective teams. Looking at this current budget proposal for the Department of Environmental Protection, the governor is proposing a general fund spend of $291 million, which is an increase of $44 million or 18%. And for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the governor is proposing a general fund spend of $182.8 million, an increase of $56.1 million or 44.3%. Although we do understand some of that is coming from the oil and gas lease fund, so we'd expect some additional information on that. We have a lot to get through. I know there's a lot of updates related to the permitting processes and everything happening here in Pennsylvania with our environmental resources. And all the opportunities that are coming our way via data centers and energy production, thanks to some of the changes we made in last year's budget to move forward. So with that, I will allow the questions to begin.
Thank you, gentlemen. Secretaries, we thank you so much for being here with us. Before we start, can you stand so we can swear everybody in? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? You may be seated. Just want to remind you to all, please speak directly into the microphone so that everybody here and at home watching on TV can hear you. In the middle of the clock, in the middle of the table is our time clock. When it turns green, that means you may start, and our members will have questions for you. They'll have 5 minutes to ask you questions. When it turns yellow, that means that there is 30 seconds left in that 5-minute time period. We would hope that you would wrap up your answer. And when it turns red, then that means that time has expired. Secretary Shirley, Secretary Dunn, do either of you have an introductory comment, statements? Please proceed.
Okay, Cindy Dunn here, happy to go first. Good afternoon, Chair Harris, Chair Struzzi, and members of the House Appropriations Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss Governor Shapiro's 26-27 proposed budget for DCNR and for your support and engagement throughout the years. The eyes of the world will be in Pennsylvania this year as America celebrates its 250th birthday. From the NFL draft at Point State Park to the Christmas Day reenactment at Washington Crossing State Park, our public lands will be places where people go to see events, to learn more about Pennsylvania and hear the story of this nation. It's interesting to be talking about this in this very room, where the very first reading of the Declaration of Independence is depicted on this mural, and scenes from Valley Forge and other key places in Pennsylvania surround us today. But for us at DCNR, our 1,450 full-time staff and our wage staff will be the face of Pennsylvania to those visiting the Commonwealth, some for the first time and some residents going around to learn more about their home state. The in-state and out-of-state travelers will spend their dollars here in Pennsylvania, and we're really ready to show off Pennsylvania's great parks, forests, conservation landscapes, and heritage areas, all of which have a wonderful story to tell. Pennsylvania is where America's freedom journey began, and it's fitting that our parks and forests are free, open and accessible to all. Nothing more affordable than free. With your continued support, we'll improve public lands by improving our infrastructure so that we can clearly and safely enjoy the outdoor spaces that define the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We really want to thank the House of Representatives for passing House Bill 1331, the capital itemization bill, and really encourage your help to get that through the Senate. We depend on that to make our public spaces safe and welcoming to all. Governor Shapiro's strategy reflects a vision that supports today's needs while preparing for generations yet to come. As we discussed last year, we'll be bringing our 125th state park online this year at Laurel Caverns, and thank you for the budget support last year that allowed us to do that. Stay tuned for that announcement in Fayette County. And we'll be adding the very popular Glenanoco Trail and Track to Lehigh Gorge State Park. Again, another key tourism destination in the Poconos region, which will add a lot of overnight stays for visitors to the area and build the economy. The outdoor recreation economy is critical to our economy of Pennsylvania and to our health. Pennsylvania's parks and forests, as well as the grants we make for our local trails and parks support the outdoor industry. We recently announced $85 million in grants to cities, boroughs, and our partners for parks, playgrounds, pools, trails, and green space across Pennsylvania. The outdoor industry is worth $19 billion to Pennsylvania's gross domestic product and employs 120,000 jobs across all areas of Pennsylvania. The Outdoor Recreation Office, launched a few years ago by Governor Shapiro, has engaged with 1,000 recreation businesses to chart a path forward with an outdoor business alliance. Conserved forest land diminishes flooding, filters water, cools temperatures, and provides clean oxygen to breathe and supports renewable forest products. This year in Pennsylvania, we'll celebrate 1 billion board feet of sustainably harvested lumber. I'm told that's the whole way to the moon. Haven't been there. Both DCNR's forest and private forest land provide sustainable flow of forest products that are key to the $24 billion forest products industry. Building on previous strategic investments, we are thankful that the governor's proposed budget for the Commonwealth for 26-27 fiscal year from all sources includes $665 million for DCNR to support our work. It's going to be an exciting year. We look forward to partnering with you to meet the needs of your communities and to help people and businesses thrive. I invite you to join us in public places or maybe even work for a day with our Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps crews. Again, I want to thank you for helping secure the much-needed funding that will strengthen and protect our natural resources while benefiting Pennsylvania's communities, businesses, cities, and residents. And I really look forward to your questions this year. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Harris, Chairman Struzzi, Chairman Vitale, Chairman Rader, Chairman Fiedler, and I'm sure Chairman Causer. I haven't seen him, but I'm sure he will probably be here. I'm Jessica Shirley. I am the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection. Today with me, I have David Altoff, who is our Energy Director. He has 33 years of experience with DEP, most of them within our Energy Office. And John Ryder, who is our Deputy Secretary for Field Operations, who has 27 years of experience with the department, most of that coming up through our regional programs. At DEP, we have almost 2,700 dedicated professionals who work every day to serve Pennsylvanians and demonstrate our mission. Our values of public service, environmental stewardship, and commitment to customers drive this agency and its staff. Our overarching duty is to oversee the more than 86,000 miles of streams and rivers, more than 217,000 oil and gas wells, and almost 2,000 active coal mines and quarries, in addition to nearly 8,000 drinking water facilities that provide clean, safe drinking water for more than 11.6 million Pennsylvanians. This enormous responsibility focuses our energy and gives us a strong sense of purpose to protect the Commonwealth's environment as effectively and efficiently as we can. This responsibility also requires capacity and resources. And this year, DEP's budget request includes an increase of approximately $2.5 million for environmental program management and $3.1 million for environmental protection operations. It also includes $530,000 in additional funds to continue our important work with the Chesapeake Bay agricultural source abatement to reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment runoff from farmland. For our public health efforts, this budget includes an additional $227,000 for black fly control and research and $181,000 to help manage the spreading of disease from insects. The governor's proposal also includes a $20 million one-time transfer for hazardous sites cleanup fund to help make former industrial land safe for public use. Thank you for allowing me to provide an opening, and we're looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. We're going to start. Chair Fiedler.
To the secretaries for being here and to your staffs. I want to ask a question that relates directly to the work that we're doing in the Energy Committee and something I know all of us care about, which is people's energy bills back home. I know I hear about it in my district office, and many of my colleagues have talked about it as well. Projections for our energy needs are huge, and I believe we need to do a lot very, very quickly if we have any chance of avoiding some of the worst case scenarios, right? The blackouts, brownouts, things like that really are beyond comprehension right now, but could very, very soon become part of our daily reality. I think this question is best directed toward Mr. Althoff. I don't mean to skip either of the secretaries, so certainly please do feel free to weigh in. But as we work to increase grid reliability and do everything we can to get new sources of energy online, one thing that keeps coming up is battery storage. And I know one of my colleagues is working on legislation on that topic, Rep. Rivera is. I wondered if you could speak to battery storage and its usefulness in accomplishing at least two of those goals: increasing reliability, keeping people's bills down, and trying to smooth out the peaks in some of our demand. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for that question, Representative Fiedler. Certainly, I think that storage is perhaps the most important but least thought about resource in the electricity sector. It's one of the things that we have in other sectors relative to liquid fuels or natural gas. We have the most underground storage caverns in Pennsylvania in the United States with regards to natural gas. But we have very little electricity storage either within Pennsylvania or within the PJM grid. I was doing some research the other day, and just Texas alone, which is one RTO, has over 14 gigawatts of electricity storage. PJM all by itself has 328 megawatts of storage. So over 14,000 megawatts in Texas alone, but only 328 in PJM, only 35 megawatts of storage in Pennsylvania. We really investigated this opportunity way back in 2021. My office delivered a Pennsylvania Energy Storage Assessment Report in 2021, whereby we came out with 15 recommendations of how to increase storage in Pennsylvania. That report was sort of the underlying fact document that was used with the PUC to come out with their energy storage policy statement. But we're continuing to work forward with regards to how we deploy energy storage in Pennsylvania, because I think you can sort of consider those to be like the first responder electrons, and we should be optimizing our grid through price signals, whereby when prices are high, we discharge batteries. When prices are low, we load batteries into those, load electrons into those batteries. So I think it's important for us to look at that as an affordability play, as something that can be built quickly, is easy to permit. Right now, in the PJM queue, just for Pennsylvania alone, there's about 5 gigawatts of projects in the queue that are either storage, solar plus storage, wind plus storage projects. In PJM in total, there's about 68 gigawatts of those types of projects. So these are technologies that we can source now, that we can source from companies within the PJM region, and we can deploy that. Now that is just what I would call front of the meter, so that's sort of utility scale energy storage. There's also a whole world that is behind the meter, whereby we can access batteries through that are connected to distributed energy generation, connected to solar that is either on your home or your business or your place of work. And so there's ways to actionize that sort of flexibility in both demand and use through battery-based virtual power plants. And I think that's a really exciting area for us to dig into. And like I said, we've done the work. We have the storage assessment. It's 5 years old. We should probably be re-updating it. But now is the time, because price signals are showing us that.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to direct my question to DEP, Secretary Shirley. I want to touch base on the Fiscal Code Act 45 of 2025, which included several initiatives that specifically applied to your agency. These include the expansion of the SPEED program, which is the Streamlining Permits for Economic Expansion and Development, the authorization of a public tracker and database of the permits involved in the SPEED program, and an acceleration of the timeframes for DEP to complete its review of 2 types of permit applications. Secretary, I'm wondering if you can give us a status update of your department's implementation of these initiatives.
Sure. So I'll do the tracker first. We actually had that in the fiscal code last year. we were able to kind of do a beta testing of the tracker, which overlays our system of record EFACs, and it pulls out information related to all of the permits that have come into DEP since like October 2024. Gives an update of where they are, if they've been issued, and I think last year, Act 45 expanded that to other agencies. We do have a couple of permits that were not electronic that will be pulling into that program over the next couple of weeks. We're working with Code PA on that, so that I think we're in pretty good standing. Speed, I'm glad that you know what it stands for. I trip over the word sometimes. We just call it speed. We began implementation of that program in August of the initial permits that were in there. We have had 3 permits issued, 2 air quality permits, 1 NPDES permit. I think there's 13 currently in the queue. But last fiscal code added additional permits to that, mining, storage tanks, and there's one other one. They are in the process now of going through the procurement process to bring on qualified professionals. So that took us about a year last year, but I think we've kind of figured out how to do it, so we expect it to go a lot faster this year to add those additional permits.
Can you, if I can just, just switching gears a little bit, I'm curious specifically in the Governor's Office of Transportation Opportunity, OTO, what's your interfacing with that office and kind of how the load is shared between those two?
So I think the Office of Transformation and Opportunity really, I would describe them as like a storefront for permitting. So a lot of large entities or folks who want a site in Pennsylvania initially reach out to them, and they kind of give a menu of options for permitting that we have. There's other things that they work with OTO, but we interface with them on the permitting side. So there's like a fast track program, but then even in addition to that, we have some other projects that I would say rise to like a higher level of attention. We make sure that we're really tracking those and staying on top of those. And they work directly with John Ryder down here on making sure that we're meeting our timelines and our obligations very regularly. We have a very large spreadsheet that we work with regularly with them.
So let me keep going because I know I'm going to be short on time here. I'm curious specifically dealing with Code PA, a $3.7 million increase that the governor's executive budget proposed to support the creation of some of these initiatives. And you had previously reported you were implementing the first phase of a $21 million IT infrastructure upgrade. I'm curious if that $3.7 million in the proposed budget through Code PA is in addition to, or is that part of that $21 million that you referenced?
I believe that's in addition to. I think that would be a question for the Office of Administration, but my understanding is that that is in addition to the $21 million. So the $21 million is for the PLC, the Permitting Licensing Certification. I think that $3 million is for the tracker that was passed last year.
So that's great to know, and I'll follow up with OA on that. Have you estimated how much more time and funding you think will be necessary to implement these changes?
So I will say IT procurement is a lesson that we're learning at DEP kind of as we go. It is I think it's more complicated than at least I anticipated, but I think we're at a really good place right now where we're getting ready to kind of really hit the pedal and show some results. We did have some delays last year because of the budget impasse with bringing some consultants on board. But later this year, actually in a few short months, we should be rolling out the very first program in that, which is related to X-rays.
Excellent.
X-ray
I appreciate your time and responsiveness. My time's expired. I want to thank you for your time before the committee and thank the chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Chairwoman Daly.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of you to today's hearings. I have a question for Secretary Dunn. So House Resolution 87 was passed, and that was all about wildlife crossings and to temper some of the accidents involving wildlife. I'd be really interested in hearing. There were also suggestions for work that could be done. So if you could give us an update on what DCNR is doing and how that's all working. And I'm going to have a second question if there is time, and that is, as Chair of Tourism and Recreation, I've been really excited to see what's happening in the outdoor recreation area and the Outdoor Recreation Business Alliance. There's so much going on. If you could also talk about that.
Sure, thank you for the questions.
Thanks.
On the wildlife corridors, we really applauded the bill, and PennDOT was, of course, very supportive and funded the study. And then separately, Penn Environment did a study about wildlife connectivity and habitat resiliency. And our policy office has been working with the policy offices of PennDOT, DEP, Game Commission, Fish and Boat Commission, and others to soon convene a study of what can be done in Pennsylvania for wildlife connectivity and corridors. These corridors are also good for climate resiliency. As the climate changes, all kinds of plants, animals, biota need pathways to move safely. So it's much bigger than simply wildlife crossings. When you think wildlife crossing, everyone thinks about the dramatic overpass where elk or something are walking across a highway. But think amphibians, turtles, all kinds of biota that are really traveling along these corridors. And then for us, think about pollinator corridors for things like monarch butterflies that depend on milkweed. So we at DCNR are responsible for convening and coordinating the biodiversity of the state, and we have direct responsibility for plants and trees. So we're happy to convene and come up with recommendations for creating these wildlife corridors. What I expect to come out of that will be a collaborative effort where private landowners can collaborate, state government and counties can decide to focus their land conservation. Again, we work a lot with private forest landowners. I could see that expanding more. We're getting more and more relationships with meadow conversion with suburban landowners who are converting large mowed tracts into meadows. So I see a lot of positive voluntary actions coming out of this greater understanding. And then the Outdoor Recreation Office is going great guns. The Outdoor Business Alliance has talked to over 1,000 recreation businesses, and until the Outdoor Recreation Office was created, these outdoor businesses really never had a way of connecting with each other. There might be small outfitters, there might be fishing guides, hunting guides, kayak guides, there might be manufacturers, providers of information, or the support systems that then support those businesses, from printing and to all the hospitality industry that plays a big part of this. And so they've convened and talked to over 1,000 businesses to understand their needs. When you think about what success could look like, a comparison can be made to the agricultural industry, where the ag industries really collaborate to support farming in Pennsylvania. So our outdoor recreation businesses can collaborate and work with DCNR. DCED is a key partner. DCED is working with our Outdoor Recreation Office to really advance, using AI and some of the modern tools, advance our understanding of how people move through Pennsylvania, how tourists spend money, what motivates them to stay that extra day or visit the extra thing. And I think we'll see advancements in the technology that will really help businesses thrive, especially in rural Pennsylvania, where a couple small outdoor rec businesses can make all the difference. Thanks.
Thank you. And I just want to also say thank you to your staff, because I worked on that House resolution for quite a number of years, but we were only thinking about animals, I think, when it was first introduced. And then your department said, you know what, it should be wildlife, because that then includes all of those things that you talked about. So I just really appreciate it. And somehow, as the chair of Tourism and Recreation and Economic Development, I think it's really important to remember that those two topics all tie into economic development for the state. But I get to be with that Outdoor Business Alliance. They invite me to their meetings. What was I told? I don't have a vote, but I have a voice.
You really have a voice.
So it's really good, I think, because it's one of the things that's so positive about what's happening in Pennsylvania, and because it is just such an amazing state. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
We appreciate your leadership and your encouragement all along. And Nathan Rigner, our Director of Outdoor Recreation Office, has now been asked to lead the confluence of states nationally. So the leadership that all of you have provided here in Pennsylvania, I mean, he's staying here, but he's the volunteer chair of that broader group. And it's because of the support from people like you that has allowed us to go so far so fast. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Krupa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here this morning. My questions are actually for Secretary Shirley, but I have to give Secretary Dunn a shout out and thank you for all your efforts in making sure that Laurel Caverns is going to be the next state park. I share your passion and love of Laurel Caverns. Secretary Shirley, your agency is projected to receive approximately $3.355 billion in federal funding, which is consistent with the current year's amount. Do you anticipate issues receiving this authorized funding, especially when it addresses key legacy issues that are huge in my area in southwestern Pennsylvania, such as orphan well plugging and abandoned mine reclamation, totaling approximately $1.065 billion for related programs?
Thank you for that question. I think you've really highlighted an immense opportunity that we have here in Pennsylvania with using these federal dollars to clean up these communities in these lands that have been unusable for so long. I'll take AML first. We received several lines of funding from the federal government for those AML funds. Some of them have been in existence for quite some time, but the IIJA passed in 2021 basically put it on steroids, and we were receiving $245 million a year for 15 years, I believe. And it was about $3.6 billion total over that time. Recently, Congress decided to give that fund a haircut, and they pulled off about 10% of those funds. I believe it was 10%, which, we would hate to see any of those funds diverted because we could use every dollar here. Pennsylvania, we estimate there's a $5 billion obligation when it comes to cleaning up abandoned mine lands in Pennsylvania, and that's in today's dollars. Those costs are only going to get more expensive as time goes on. But, we're grateful for the funding that we do get. And
forgive me, I'm trying to be respectful of time. With respect to the $3.355 billion that's projected, specifically with that bucket of money, are you anticipating any issues obtaining that or receiving that authorized funding?
So there's a handful of funds that we have had clawed back from the federal government. AML funding, oil and gas funding have not, or the well plugging funding have not been subject to that, other than the haircut that was given to those AML funds.
Okay.
A big chunk of that funding is probably from our RISE grant, the Reducing Industrial Sector Emissions, which is about $400,000. Excuse me, $400 million. Thanks, Dave. So, I mean, and then we have the funding for other, Chesapeake Bay, and it's several lines of funding. So I will say though, every year we do see a lot of those categorical grants get zeroed out by the president's budget, but they do seem to find their way back into it with Congress. So we do advocate through the Environmental Council of States to make sure that those categorical funds do make their way back into that budget.
Okay, and I want to pivot a little bit from that because the government's proposing the establishment of a new fund. My understanding is that these are funds from the Rainy Day Fund, the Federal Response Fund, to respond to and mitigate, and I'm going to just read this, any action or inaction by the federal government that results in a reduction in funding to critical programs that impact the health, safety, and welfare of Pennsylvanians, and reportedly to be determined by the Secretary of the Budget. Have you had any discussions with the governor related to this proposed fund? And if so, can you share what type of potential responses the fund will be used for? The availability of federal funds for your agency, it's important to address these protection and legacy issues that I mentioned. Is this proposed fund intended to backfill any potential projected losses from federal revenue?
So I can give you a really good example of that, but I'm not going to get too specific because it does relate to national security. So last year we saw a lapse of funding in one of our programs where we had funding from the Department of Homeland Security that funded a program to ensure that people in some very populated areas of the state are not under attack. And it was, there's just so much uncertainty.
I'm sorry, two quick questions. Does that confirm that you've talked to the governors about this issue?
Oh, yes.
And under attack from whom?
Can we talk offline? I really don't want to make this public. I'll be perfectly
And with all
honest
due
with you.
respect, my job and your job is a very public job, that everything that we discuss along these lines should be publicly discussed.
Given the federal
Everybody will
events,
suspend.
I would just say, given the
Hold on.
federal
Hold on.
events, I
Suspend.
can't speak of
Suspend.
it.
With all due respect, if there is an issue of national security, that should not be public. And so if there's a conversation to be had offline, I do think it is appropriate, citing security issues, that we do have that offline. So if you want to conclude with what we can share publicly, and then if there is the necessity or the concern for a conversation offline, we can do that.
I can give more specifics offline, but just overall, there was a lapse in funding. We had to lay staff off. We didn't have room to basically move in our budget to be able to transfer funds over to it. So I think this is a result from the budget office, the budget secretary, and the governor seeing this need. It's not just for when funding gets clawed back, it's for the lapses of funding that maybe don't get distributed right away. You know, we at DEP, we have a ton of special funds, and we can't move them around. So, you know, with this specific case, I think it highlights the need for funding that's maybe flexible with the governor's budget office, that they can slot money in where they feel that it's necessary, even if it's just for a stopgap period, or, you know, I'm sure other agencies are dealing with it as well.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about national security issues privately. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the secretaries and to the panel. My questions are for Secretary Shirley, and I'd like to talk about the forever chemicals, PFAS, and their environmental impact. I represent the communities of Abington, Upper Dublin, and the borough of Rockledge in eastern Montgomery County, and we've suffered some PFAS contamination from the Willow Grove Joint Air Base into the aquifer. And want to know, I mean, we've been able to, you know, kind of the silver lining of PFAS is that it is able to be filtered out of water supplies, but we obviously come into contact with it in many other ways, and want to try to get a sense of DEP having their arms around the statewide levels of contamination and any plans that you may have to continue to address that.
Sure. You set me up nicely to talk about Haskell. I don't know that you intended to do that. But yes, Pennsylvania, we have a pretty large PFAS contamination issue across the state. We set our first ever MCL, which is in place. The federal MCL still has not been put into place, but our MCL is put into place. And because of that, we have been able to identify areas where we know that there's contamination. We have the data. Once we work with a drinking water supplier to have their system retrofitted with the carbon technology or whatever technology they're using to remove the PFAS, that's on our safe drinking water side. That actually kicks off an investigation on our HASCA side, our environmental cleanup in brownfields, where they go out and they try to identify the source of funding. In your case, everybody knows where it's coming from, but that program then can start identifying potential remediation actions. We are very much strained in this fund, which is why we're asking for the $20 million, I would say, stopgap this year to ensure that we can continue. And it's not just an investigation. A lot of times we're providing drinking water to people. There is an investigation right now in my hometown where we just issued a fish consumption advisory. We have told fishermen, do not eat the fish that you catch from the stream because they're contaminated with PFAS. We are testing private water wells. There's a lot of private water wells all over Pennsylvania that might also be contaminated. We are installing POET systems, which are the point basically on those private drinking water wells. It's an incredibly large challenge. I do think we have our arms around it much better than a lot of states do, where we're now starting to look at how do we address it in biosolids. We're seeing maybe some history or seeing some of the contamination coming from biosolids. We're looking at our own programs and saying, how can we make sure that we're not making this problem worse, and how can we make sure that we're protecting the public?
And you mentioned the $20 million potential increase. Would any of that be used for these filtration devices?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. That's part of our program.
Great. Is there any sign of contribution from the water suppliers too? Is that typically?
So the POET systems would go on private wells. The water suppliers, they didn't put the contamination there. Unfortunately, they're the ones that have to deal with it because they are delivering it to their customers. They have an obligation to make sure the water that they're delivering to their customers is clean. So a lot of them will go through Penvest for grants and loans for the installation, or the equipment at the public water systems. But at the private water systems, if there's no responsible party, which in some cases there is, but most cases there is not, that's something that's funded through HASCA.
And with the few moments I have remaining, so you talked about, remediation and addressing some of the contamination that's there. How about the prospective contamination? Because it's my understanding we're still using these foams in significant fire events, and, while very effective, they do contain the chemicals.
So I think we've done a whole lot of education with the state fire commissioner about when to use these foams. I do know that there's some legislation pending in the Senate that would restrict fire departments from using the foams in training activities, but we are encouraging those departments to basically give back or dispose of those AFFF foams, the ones that do contain fluorine, and switch to fluorine-free foams because they do exist.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Brown.
Thank you. Secretary Shirley, this question is for you. So I want to talk a bit about data centers, which I think many of us have been approached in our districts. I know in my district I've had 3 potentially wanting to move in. So do you know if the Office of the Office of Transformation and Opportunity is going to be the lead office for GRID, the governor's responsible infrastructure development standard? And will the DEP be involved?
That's a good question. I don't believe that OTO will be responsible for GRID. I do think what GRID is it's an overview of the way that we want to see data centers operate in Pennsylvania to be able to receive those highest state benefits. So I think DCED will have a pretty big role to play with regard to if it's used for any type of tax benefit. On our side, right now I think there are some projects, data centers that are on the fast track list for permits, which is just really enhanced tracking. We're making sure that we're staying on top of those permits. We want to see those developers using the highest standards that are available, and that's whenever they would be able to receive that fast tracking benefit. So,
yes. And
so that would be through us.
I will say that I've heard with the Homer City development that, in fact, they've received a lot of support from your office. Permits have been moving quicker, which is great for economic development. But I do have concerns about the environment, as well as, the potential effect to the utility rates for consumers in my area. And now, if you're saying that that office is not going to be engaged,
Oh, I think they will be engaged.
but they won't be the lead office.
I don't know. I don't know that we've had that in depth of conversation. I mean, I've thought about it from the environmental side. I think we plan on leading that. You know, but I mean, obviously they would have a pretty significant role.
I'm just worried about potential developers moving in and now sending mixed messages as to, you know, what the standards are moving forward. Now with Reggie out of the way, does this add another layer of complexity, and who's leading the charge?
I don't think the intention here is to necessarily change requirements, but it's to say if you want to receive the state support that a lot of them are seeking through tax benefits, through, you know, enhanced permitting, then they have to do something more. So think of it like I at least am thinking of it like a menu. If you do, you know, this, if you bring your own energy, right? If you do significant community outreach to find out what those community needs are, and you work with that community to address those needs. If you do enhanced environmental remediation, if you site on an abandoned mine land or maybe a previously developed land, then you get these higher state benefits like speedy permitting, you know, tax revenues. But if you're just looking to site in Pennsylvania, the standard, it won't change that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like there's the floor and then there's the ceiling. If you go to the ceiling, you get the benefits, but you can still come in on the floor.
So there won't be specific reformed permitting processes that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Young.
Good afternoon, everybody. Secretary Dunn, question around the backlog of state park infrastructure projects. As we are now in 2026, we've been anticipating this year for so long, especially with the world looking at the Commonwealth. We want to make sure that we are up and ready, but there's still a backlog of issues with our infrastructure. So a recent report by the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation documented a $1 billion backlog list of projects to be addressed in the state's parks and forests. Has the agency taken any stride in reducing this backlog?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a great question. And I really do appreciate this body's passing of House Bill 1331. That's a huge help. And we have made great progress. And I'm going to turn it over to John Norbeck to detail some of that progress and where we are now.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So I can start off by thanking this group and also Governor Shapiro for the $112 million that was authorized in our 2023 budget. That was oil and gas lease fund money, and all that money goes right back into the repairs of state park infrastructure. We have about $5 billion worth of infrastructure in parks and forests. So you think about 145 dams, 178 sewage treatment plants, 78 water treatment plants. Those types of things are rather expensive, but almost 3,500 miles of roads. So we do have a big infrastructure. We have been knocking down that backlog, and we, at this current point, we have about $818 million that are on projects that are on the backlog list, and we are prioritizing those from looking at public health and safety opportunities, and a lot of that is in dams and bridge reconstruction. And then we look at the legal requirements, whether it's regulatory or by statute, to repair facilities there. And then finally, we do look at opportunities where we can increase the service to the general public for visiting their parks and forests.
Thank you for that. I know 2026 is here, and we've been talking about this year for such a long time, but actually, as we're going beyond 2026, what are your thoughts on us moving forward in a way that even those of us who are in the Commonwealth, who want to experience these great spaces that we already have, as we're bringing in more tourists, what do you think would be a reasonable time frame with the infrastructure in place to really say that we are ready to meet the world in what year?
Well, I'll just say this, the world's coming, and we'll meet them with 1,450 staff that are ready to meet them. I just think it's, like you point out, to go beyond 2026, it's constant work, it's constant improvement. When you look at our population base in Pennsylvania, we have an aging population, so accessibility, just in the physical sense, but accessibility for all and being welcoming for all means even better design and better thought given into infrastructure and how we connect things. But we are working judiciously with support from this body and the Senate on doing the right stuff, really doing the sustainable infrastructure. Our green initiative, and maybe John can touch on that, our green initiative actually saves us money when we build using GISA and solar. We actually return money to the coffer. So John, why don't you mention that quickly while we run out of time?
Sure. As far as the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, it's an opportunity for DCNR or any other state agency actually working through the Department of General Services to contract for energy saving work on their facilities. So at DCNR, we are in the process of actually finishing all of our facilities across the Commonwealth. We've invested about $48 million worth of infrastructure work that will reduce our energy consumption over the next 20 years by $71 million. So we're going to be saving about $1 million a year in our infrastructure because of our infrastructure changes and our energy use.
Thank you so much.
And to answer your question, we are ready.
All right, I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome teams DEP and DCNR. Glad to have you here today. Secretary Dunn, if you will, the governor's proposed budget includes significant general fund increases for both state park operations and state forest operations due to the shifting the funds source from the oil and gas lease fund where these lines were funded last year. Can you provide us with an update regarding the status of the oil and gas lease fund given this proposed shift? And is this something that you requested for your operating appropriations?
We provide our best estimate on the oil and gas lease fund looking ahead, and it is highly variable. The average over the years is about $95 million, so this year is better than average. We're estimating $104 million this year. The budget year that we're sitting in now, that we're coming out of, was exceptionally high at $145 million due to situations in Europe and Russia and things beyond our control. So it is like any energy fund, it's up and down and up and down. Historically, we were a general fund funded agency completely. It wasn't until the leases of 08 and 10 that we became partially funded operationally on oil and gas. And a couple of lawsuits limited like the oil and gas, use of the oil and gas lease fund in our budget. So we were guided by that, guided by our best estimates. And I think that variability is something we can expect in perpetuity if we continue to depend on oil and gas lease fund for part of operating budget.
Okay, let me ask you, can you tell us how much revenue the oil and gas lease fund has received in royalties from non-surface impact unconventional natural gas development, including state park and state forest lands, as well as understream beds?
I can, I think. I have that. Do you have that handy, John? Yeah, I can't. Right, I don't think I'm prepared to divide conventional and unconventional. John, why don't you take a crack at that? It's hard to slice it in those individual. We can certainly provide what we can't do here. We can provide in detail later if we can't cover it.
Yeah, so we have over 600, almost 670 non-conventional wells on DCNR lands, right? And that's in 74 leases. About 2/3 of those leases have been developed. So we have about 37% of those leases that are yet to be developed. We also have about 160 well pads on our property. So your question was about, it sounded like you're trying to divide up revenue developed from pads that are on DCNR lands and pads that are not.
So the non-surface impact unconventional natural gas development from the state park and state forest lands, as well as the understream beds. And let me ask you this: maybe what portion of the royalties can be traced to the stream beds? Do you know? Is that an easier question?
We can certainly get that for you. I don't have happen to have it with me right now. And that's an unpredictable revenue stream for us because they can be anywhere in the Commonwealth. We manage the lease. It's just any place a company is aiming to do a lateral under a stream. It really is a good environmental move because it saves them from doing another pad on the other side of the river. And they pop up unpredictably for us. They're not in the state lands.
We do have about 40 leases, those stream bed leases, which is over 500 well bores underneath of those river lands. I don't have the revenue that's generated from those, but I can certainly get that for you.
I'll make a request that I get them
we'll
from
get
you. And
that
thank
to
you very much for
Happy
that.
to get that for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both secretaries and to your teams. I'm going to attempt the impossible today and get a question in for both DEP and DCNR. The first for DEP regarding data centers. I think the average Pennsylvanian understands that data centers are part of our new world as technology marches forward and requires them. I also think the same typical average resident in Pennsylvania believes that that those belong, if they are approved in any of our communities, they belong in industrial areas away from residential development and must be held to the highest environmental community standards possible. I think when I think back to my district and the potential for numerous data centers just in one municipality, let alone the deluge of applications and interest across Lackawanna County, I think that's where people feel overwhelmed and understandably concerned, and I'm counted among those with those concerns about the resiliency of our basic needs, power, water, and the health and safety of our communities and our environment. So to that end, does DEP currently possess the ability, when they are reviewing applications for other industries, data centers included, do they have the ability to consider the cumulative impact or effects on an area?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. One thing just to make sure that we're all clear on here, where the data center is located is strictly a municipality decision. The department does not have any oversight on siting. What we do is we do permitting for the construction of the box that the data center is in, and then any activities that they would need to be able to operate. So, water withdrawals and whatnot. When it comes to your specific question, and I'm blanking, what was your question? What was the
Basically, does DEP have the ability to consider the cumulative effect?
impacts? Thank you.
Because I know there are a litany of applications that go in for any sort of development, data centers included.
Yeah, this is a really great question. We do not. When it comes to air quality, we do have to look at the area and might have to put additional controls or control mechanisms in place if there's an air source. But overall, we do not have the legal ability to consider cumulative impacts in permitting decisions.
Well, we appreciate that you have to enforce the laws on the books, and we are working to put laws on the books that would enable you to do just that, and to make sure that we are protecting our communities. To Secretary Dunn and to your team, I wanted to ask about the Pennsylvania Outdoor Corps. Sure. It's now in its 11th year.
Yes.
And I know over 1,000 young people have participated. So if you would just tell us about their work and how we can further engage the next generation, my kids included, in conservation in the outdoors.
Right. Well, you know how valuable it is. You know how hard they work, too. I got to give credit to the Department of Labor and Industry. They fund it through the redevelopment fund, reemployment fund, I mean. And they've been a key partner in the training and development of the young people through work skills and through workforce training. But for us, we expose the Outdoor Corps to a number of our categories of workers. They work side by side with maintenance, with management, with rangers, with educators, so they get a broad array of experiences. They learn the soft skills like showing up on time, communicating, working as a team, all the things needed for employment. Then with our staff in labor and industry, they get resume building and job skills in terms of finding a job, how to seek a job, how to do an interview. So we build the full set of skills for these young people to prepare them for the workforce. Happily, we've been able to hire 62 of these folks, and I can think of a few of them that I've known from the first day they walked in to a youth crew. And I remember them when they walked in the door, both Kelsey and Quinn, very young, and they became outdoor corps crew leaders, and now they're on our staff. So it's just very gratifying to see the development of young people into our workforce. And it's, I'd say our executive team probably would all say, of all the programs we have, it's the one that really warms our heart the most.
I really appreciate you. Thank you all for your service and for making 2 questions possible.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Rigby.
Thank you, Chairman. This is for Secretary Shirley in reference to biosolids. I know members of this committee have raised concerns with you before, and I'm hoping we can have an update and clarification of what DEP's position currently is, specifically on 2 issues. One, is DEP bypassing the Environmental Quality Board's regulatory process and implementing major biosolids policy changes through permit revisions, when those changes will raise costs for municipal authorities, increase rates and taxes for constituents, and limit farmers' access to biosolids without legislative oversight or a clear cost-benefit justification. Second part is, are you aware that the Pennsylvania Municipal Authority Association, among other stakeholders, have expressed their concern about the substance and process of these sweeping changes by your agency? This is reflected in the 2026 PMAA resolution, which refers to the Legislative Budget and Finance Committees commissioned by my House Resolution 194 or 149 in 2021-2022 session, which determined that such major revisions should go through regulatory and legislative review and not by general permit change.
Thank you for that question. So we recently underwent a work group process. I believe PMAA was a part of it. We had a number of other folks that were a part, the appliers, we had representation of farmers. We have implemented these permits, these biosolid permits, for probably close to 30 years. They are authorized in regulation and statute, and we do periodically update them in relation to things that change at the federal level and regulations, the regulatory changes that go through the typical rulemaking process. So we've been working on these permits, updating these permits since 2016. They have been administratively extended. But we went through a process over the last several months to draft new permits to address PFAS. Specifically, we've also looked at phosphorus, which we know that we have an issue with in Pennsylvania getting into our waterways, and a number of other tweaks to it. We looked at the states around us, we looked at Michigan, but what we really are trying to avoid is Pennsylvania becoming a dumping ground for biosolids that have heavy metals, that have PFAS in them. So I think that we think that we've come up with a really good solution working with those stakeholders. One that is implementable. It's based on what they're doing in Michigan. It's based on, we looked at what was done in North Carolina, and we think that the draft permits should go out for public comment in the next few weeks. We'll take public comment on those before they become final. But they are rooted in regulatory and statutory means.
They are?
They are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to both secretaries and your staffs for being here today. My first question is for Secretary Dunn. I have the pleasure and honor of representing Point State Park in downtown Pittsburgh. And I know that recently the access to it has been a little bit limited because of the renovations in preparation for the NFL draft. But I want to just kind of get your sense of sort of post-draft. I know, before all the renovations, the park has been utilized for event space, for festivals, things like that. How do you envision, once the renovations are complete, draft passes, how we will be able to utilize Point State Park once again.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for your support of Point State Park, and hope to see you at the NFL draft.
I'll be there.
You and a million of our friends, right?
For sure.
The on-again, off-again repairs at Point are a little complex. We had to get it ready for the NFL draft, so we did a number of key improvements and several projects last year to be ready for this year. And then once again, next year, we'll have some more capital improvements. I'll ask John just to make sure I get it right time-wise on how those go. But generally speaking, one of the purposes of Point is big events, so that's our goal.
Yeah, again, thanks for the question. So we did about $3 or $4 million worth of work to get ready for the NFL draft and also for 250 PA. We're going to have some great festivities down there this year. Once that's over, we have a capital project. It's in design right now. It's going to be about a $30 million capital project, and it'll be linked with the downtown revitalization. So we have a lot of really cool stuff being developed right now and designed right now for Point State Park to reimagine that as even a better public space.
So do you envision larger scale festivities and events happening in 2026, 2027? I know there's another year of renovations. When do you see that being accessible?
So I think 26 and 27, we will have events there.
Okay.
Because it is in the design stage right now.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my second question for Secretary Shirley, I want to keep on this subject of data centers. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about developers. There will be some type of criteria that they're benchmarks that they're going to have to be able to meet to make their permitting process efficient. One of the things you mentioned was around community engagement. Just wanted to see if you can sort of get into the weeds a little bit more about what that actually would look like from the department standpoint to really hold them accountable to do true community engagement work. I envision developers sending postcards to neighbors and saying, we engage the community, or hosting a community meeting like on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock when everybody's at work, and then saying, we checked off that box to do that. So what are you all going to do to ensure that community engagement is what we envision as real engagement for community members?
Yeah, thank you for that question. One of the things that frustrates me a little bit as the Secretary of DEP is when our process is the first time that residents have the opportunity to engage on a project. Because by the time it gets to us, we're very limited in the things that we can require and change. But what we can do is provide that that outreach or that connection to from the residents to the developers, which is what we do in a lot of cases. But ideally for me, what I would like to see is these developers going to the community, describing their project, and then asking the community what it is that they need. So this would likely be held at a local level, where maybe the township supervisors, or even it could be done at the county level, would facilitate a conversation. If the community has concerns about noise, then the developer would make a commitment to that community about how they would mitigate noise. If they have a concern about the answer that the example that I like to give is if they're cutting down a bunch of trees to build that data center, well, then they would make a commitment to restore those trees 2 to 1 within that community. But it really has to be up to the community. The community has to decide what they want. We want to make it as easy as possible for those communities to kind of understand what different things that they can ask for. A lot of these communities where data centers are being cited don't even have zoning. So they're very, try to say this in a gentle way, they're not super savvy sometimes. So we want to maybe share some best practices, let them know possibilities, things that they can ask for, because I do think a lot of times these developers are willing to pay for them and address those things. They just need to have that connection to know what those things are. So we would want to see, real effort, not just, I sent you a postcard, we held a virtual meeting at 1 p.m. and 2 people showed up. Yeah. Real effort by these companies to have that community engagement.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Representative Alsper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretaries, thank you both for being here today and your teams. First, a comment for Secretary Dunn. I want to thank you on behalf of several folks back in the 139th. I want to thank you for your work on helping us with a state park back there and a situation there. Very grateful for your help and your team's help there. Also with your help with the Upper Delaware and an organization along there. So very much appreciated. My question is for Secretary Shirley. Secretary Shirley, last year when I was here, I asked you whether you could explore some common sense approach to safe drinking water standards for small rural daycare centers that rely on high quality well water rather than public systems. These centers can absorb the high ongoing testing costs, maintenance, and regulatory costs that DEP imposes. And I think we talked about that last year. What solutions or successes can you talk to us about here today, and maybe that we can discuss that would help unburden the rural providers and the families who depend on them?
Yeah, thanks for that. So happy to report, since last year, our local government liaison, who's now an external affairs manager, Rob Sachs, has been doing a ton of outreach to local municipalities. We've developed a fact sheet to distribute to those municipalities that when businesses come in for a license, they at least understand what their requirements are for providing safe drinking water, whether they fall into, a private situation or if they do fall into one of those community categories, which a lot of businesses do. So we've done a lot of education around this to make sure that when they are exploring a property, that they understand where they fall within those requirements or those standards and that definition of, being a private or a community system.
So if they understand that they fall in those requirements, is there any assistance that DEP offers?
For childcare facilities, I know that we offer assistance in testing for lead, but as far as the other requirements go for testing, I do not believe that there's really any program. We would be happy to explore that. It's not just daycare centers, but I do think small businesses, we hear this a lot, where they do have difficulty. We would welcome a further conversation, but it really comes down to resources for everybody.
All right, I've got another question here. Can you provide an update on the Act 537 Sewage Facilities Program, particularly your oversight on the on-lot alternative sewer system technologies, OATS? Additionally, how does the department view OATS under the policy changes that took effect on July 29th, 2023?
So we have been working on updating our sewer regulations for the last year or so. These regulations have not been updated in 25 years, which is a really long time to go without updating regulations. Over that time, we would have liked to have seen some incremental changes, but we weren't able to do that. So this rulemaking package is going to have a lot of changes in it, including those alternative systems. I actually had this just explained to me again on Friday, because sewage, I have to tell you, is one of my least favorite subjects, not because of the content, but just because of the way that we have to do it in Pennsylvania, because we have so many different municipalities and everything else. So on the planning side, you first have to determine if the soil is suitable. So there is in the way that the language is written in the Act, there is a soil suitability analysis. Not every soil in Pennsylvania is suitable for having sewage on it. It's just not. So that's when we would determine whether they could have a regular on-lot system or if they could use an alternative system. Sometimes there are sites that just don't have any type of suitability for any type of system. So that's when it would be considered, you could get a waiver for it to be used for something else that's like not habitable, so a cell phone tower or something along that line. So it's an incredibly complicated system of sewage planning, but we have tried to be flexible, and I think we'll see some more flexibility whenever those regulations are finalized. They should be going out for public comment later this summer, and we're really looking forward to a robust process to hear input from the SEOs and other folks who have to implement them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give you a break from data centers, but in a certain way, it's sort of the same questions. The governor issued a letter to Secretary Noem last month. You signed on to it, and but it highlighted the fact that the facilities that they've purchased and the proposed use that they have for them would jeopardize the health and safety of Pennsylvanians. Specific to DEP, the Tremont facility proposes to use 800,000 gallons per day of water in a community where the water supply is already under extreme stress. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, more broadly the concerns in those communities and what redress is available for those communities if federal DHS decides to move forward with those plans, and then what ability does DEP have to ensure that those residents are not harmed if DHS ignores your warnings?
Thanks. I think we're currently exploring all of that because it's the federal government. I think it's a complicated factor. If it weren't the federal government, I think it would be pretty complicated. The truth of the matter is there just isn't the infrastructure there. Not just the infrastructure, but there's no resources there. So there isn't enough water in the water supply. We recently, I think on Friday, just issued increased intake ability for, I think it was the Tremont facility, to be able to bring on additional water supply because they were literally trucking it in just to have enough for the existing folks that live there. So to triple their population overnight, there just simply would not be the quantity of water that's necessary. Then you add on the sewage facilities. I think we highlighted in the letter that one of the facilities has a 2-inch main for sewage. I mean, if you think about your house, like my own house has a probably a 4 or 5-inch pipe going out of it. So, I mean, it just goes to show you that this facility was not designed to have that many people, drinking water, flushing toilets, showering. There used to be a facility, an ICE facility in Berks County, but it was a nursing home that had been converted. So it was already permitted to hold people. It was a certain number of beds. They weren't expanding it. They weren't expanding the use, which is how they were able to retrofit it. But these facilities are warehouses. They were not meant to hold people. They were meant to hold goods and maybe host a couple hundred folks who were, running forklifts and, overseeing the operations of that. It's a lot different than having 7,500 people, housed there. So we have significant concerns on the drinking water side, also on the sewage side, that the receiving water of the local municipality that manages the sewage, we do not believe that that the receiving waters would be able to handle the effluent, and it would result in significant sewage overflows and severe degradation of those water resources.
Thank you. I serve on the board of Alcosan in Allegheny County, and we have a current consent decree with the federal government dealing with the overflow when it comes to significant wet weather events. So I think that in addition to just the concern about raw sewage being overflowing, it also exposes these municipalities to significant monetary liability from the federal government. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and thank you all for being here today. My question is for Secretary Dunn. Secretary, Pennsylvania remains one of the largest natural gas producers in the country, yet we maintain a moratorium on new leasing on our state parks and state forests originating under Governor Randall. Development continues in existing areas, but no new expansion of new state leasing. Meanwhile, neighboring states are actively promoting development. For instance, Ohio has aggressively opened up state-owned lands for development and has streamlined permitting through Jobs Ohio incentives. West Virginia continues to promote Marcellus and Utica development with regulatory framework, marketing, and business-friendly. Both states consistently message energy availability and grid reliability as the economy grows. Secretary, can you give us an update? What are the current number of drilling operations and operators on the state lease ground that you oversee?
Sure. We currently have 684 unconventional wells, and of course they were developed since 2008, and 499 conventional wells. They cover about 230, the unconventional wells cover 236,000 acres of the state forest land. So if you look at the state forest lands of Pennsylvania, they're really, the biggest concentrations north central, and the Marcellus and Utica range includes north central, but wraps down around the western border of Pennsylvania and then down into the southwest. So a lot of Pennsylvania's, especially recent oil and gas development, has actually not been on state forest land with or without the moratorium. So a lot of the action is in places where we don't have as much state forest land. So our effect on this isn't as great as maybe is thought by some people. We've had the moratorium in place since, like you mentioned, the end of the Randall era, and it continued through the Corbett administration and continued through the Wolf administration and now the Shapiro administration. And we have about, as John Norbeck, I think, mentioned in passing, there's about, 37% left of the leases we have that hasn't been developed. And then, as someone else mentioned, we do facilitate the under-river leases when they come up. Like wherever they come up, we'll facilitate that. So there's still a lot of activity, still a lot of using the same pads and the same leases, still a lot of expansion, and there's some amendments to the existing leases. So there's a lot of activity. We continually work with the companies, the leaseholders, the number of which I know we have. How many leaseholders we got on state forest? We have dozens of leaseholders. How many? 70, yeah, 70 leases. So we have a lot of activity on the state forest land now, and in our view, it's adequate for right now, and it doesn't hold Pennsylvania back. Put it that way on oil and gas development.
Perfect. You actually answered my second question. So I know you can't lift the moratorium, but you can revise it. Any interest in revising it to open it up to maybe the what do I want to say, or the non-service impact wells outside of the park and some of the forest areas?
We're asked about that from time to time by the companies, and we continue the discussion. But at this point, I think the amount of gas development on the state forest land, considering all the other uses, considering its expansion of recreation, outdoor recreation, considering our work to really save the hardwood development industry in Pennsylvania and to have core forests remain forests, we feel that there's enough development at this point in time. And I'm sure it's an issue that it'll be constantly revisited. As public lands, we expect that kind of a dialogue.
Yeah, so would that policy be the same for let's just say, expanding gas lines through the state forest as well?
Yeah, when someone wants to expand the gas, that's exactly, so it's not just the well, it's always, gas lines, water lines, there's road access, so there's quite a bit of land disturbance. Some of the impacts that we measure the most are invasive species, for instance. So we're trying to keep a repository of native species and really beat back the invasive. So anytime you cut a road, cut a line, it opens up the soil for invasives. So we do measure. We do have a process by which the companies that are moving a line through can apply and work with our staff to site it the proper place to have the minimal effect on the environment, and then to restore the corpus of the trust, owned by all Pennsylvanians, to restore that corpus so that there's no diminishment of the public estate of
Perfect. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for the question.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I got a lot here, sir, so I'm going to try to go fast. Secretary Shirley, thanks for being here. I'm going to start there. Secretary Dunn, I got good questions in both directions. You walked with me when we kicked off the Perkiomen watershed studies, and Deputy Secretary Ryder was there as well. And we've completed the study, the model is built, and we understand what our top 20 projects will be. You know, when I look at the budget and over the past few budgets, I see a lot of money for good reason in the Susquehanna watershed that protects the Chesapeake Bay and the things we have to do important. But how do we get some portion, 10%, some little bit over to the Delaware watershed so that we can start protecting that part of, you know, including right through Evansburg State Park, right?
I anticipated this question.
I was hoping you would.
I actually looked at the report. It's beautiful. You guys did a really great job with that. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted is making sure that there's really strong partnerships at your county conservation department. And I know that you have those. We have, just to highlight too, we receive a lot of federal funding for Chesapeake Bay. That's why it looks like there's so much funding for Chesapeake Bay. But for our other programs, they are statewide, like ACAP and Growing Greener in particular. So we've learned from York County, actually. Their commissioners dedicated some funding for water quality data, and I know that that's one of the things that's highlighted in that plan. Right. So, you know, looking there, you know, I'm not sure exactly where that pot of funding came from for those counties, but they have taken that step to see what is the water quality like in York County, and it's been very successful for them. Growing Greener opens on Earth Day, and we really think that it could be a huge opportunity for your Green Lane Borough Stormwater Park. You know, amazing program there. We are seeing revenues kind of drop off, but we still try to maximize those dollars. We also have something new this year, which will also be opening on Earth Day, April 22nd. Section 319, Tier 3 monitoring mini grants within the 319 Watershed Implementation Plan, and we'll be coordinating with larger entities to award these mini grants across the states, and we will be targeting specific regions for those mini grants, up to a maximum amount of $15,000 for some of those.
I mean,
projects.
as you know, so many of there are some really big projects. You know, 17 miles of an east-west intersection that's designed incorrectly for today's water flow. But there are also many small projects that would fit, and I appreciate that. Maybe
eat an elephant one bite at a time.
We're going to have to come back and my team in particular needs. We've done the study. We now need to learn how to interact, and it's regional. It's 4 counties, so we think we have some substantial asks, and I appreciate all your help in that regard. And I'm glad you were thinking of this. Secretary Dunn, this is a simple question. My district also borders Valley Forge National Park. And for my colleagues that may not know this, until 1976, Valley Forge was a state park. I didn't know that because I would have been a kid and it didn't matter to me at that point. So this year on Market 250, but it's actually the 50th birthday for Valley Forge National Park. I'm just curious, in the celebrations and things that are designed, is there something in your realm that intersects so that we celebrate Pennsylvania's gift to the national park system?
And we gave it away to the feds.
Yes, we did.
It's a great story, but they do a phenomenal job at Valley Forge, and we work in great partnership with them. But yes, our environmental educators have been preparing for America 250 for over a year. They're really ready with programs across our system. We reach thousands of young people, teachers, and visitors to state parks. And I think the neat thing about this year as people will be approaching the public lands with curiosity. They'll want to learn more about their own neighborhood, go to their local park and learn more about the area they live in. And people will be moving around Pennsylvania to visit other places and spending money. And of course, we'll get out-of-state and out-of-country visitors throughout our system. But we call it butts on benches. We got over 300,000 butts on benches in environmental ed programs last year, and we expect to really exceed that this year.
Well,
With a deeper interest in learning that everyone will approach American 50
Appreciate
with.
that.
It's a huge opportunity.
I hope that Superintendent Fennell has invited you at least to be
You know, I was out there
Okay.
last year as a prelude for it, so I'm sure I'll be going back.
Yeah, all right, thank you
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Reichert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Shirley, thank you for joining us. Secretary Dunn, really like to thank you and Deputy Secretary Norbeck for your commitment and leadership in reimagining the Penn State Mont Alto campus. You know, it's really comforting to know that, you know, that challenge that we're facing back home in my district and your willingness to step up. And I know a lot of these conversations have been definitely happening on a much higher and broader level, but would you be willing to share with us some of your thoughts and plans, as you're able to, with how we can partner with you in reimagining Penn State Mont Alto?
Sure, I'll just say something briefly, and I'll flip it to John, who's actually been working with the committee and
Very well,
yourself
yes,
and all
extraordinarily.
that.
Yes.
It is like a holy place for DCNR. It's the beginning of forestry in Pennsylvania with Joseph T. Rothrock. It's supposed to be pronounced Rothrock, apparently, from those from McVeigh tell me. But the School of Forestry was established there at Mont Alto. Myra Lloyd Dock, one of our heroines that we really listen and learn from. It was a Harrisburger who was part of the City Beautiful movement and helped launch Mont Alto. So a key woman civic leader and a key forester really got forestry going in Pennsylvania. So it's critical. It's an historic site. We got the Arboretum. We've got a little state park nestled in there with a really cool pavilion. And we got the Michaud State Forest behind it. So we are gratified for your interest and leadership.
Yes.
We're very much committed to Mont Alto. And John can talk a little bit about some of the thoughts that he might want to share at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary Dunn and Representative Reichert. As you know, but maybe some other folks in this room don't know, is that there is a group of community leaders in Franklin County that are really looking at reimagining Mont Alto for the next century. And DCNR is really proud and happy to be a part of that reimagination. There's huge opportunities there, right? And the Shapiro administration is really interested in seeing what the next iteration of Mont Alto is going to be. You know, from our standpoint, we believe that it needs to be deeply rooted in our forestry history and also education. And it was like the Secretary said, it was a school of forestry, the first school of forestry in Pennsylvania. So we would like to see it to stay along that vein. And in the group that we're talking about, you know, we have K through 12 that's very interested. We have some colleges interested in opportunities there. We've had discussions with Penn State, and Penn State's still interested in having a footprint there that we believe will work really well with that forestry theme that we're looking at Mont Alto. Okay. What our role is, it will be a lot, will be determined over the next 6 or 8 months probably, and some of that may be back in your hands.
Good. I certainly look forward to working with you on that. Again, it's extraordinarily important for the folks back in Franklin County, as it is obviously for DCNR as well. I mean, that forestry component is huge in Franklin County. I mean, a lot of folks graduate and have, you know, matriculated on to DCNR, and really that forestry component in the Franklin County, I mean, you know, whether it's through DCNR or private timber use and that sort of stuff is huge for our local economy. So I really do appreciate your continued commitment to that. Along the same lines of forestry and timber sales, just curious where we stand sort of from last year, where we the targets versus what we actually saw as far as timber sales, and then what maybe our targets might be for 2026.
Yeah, forestry and forest products remain an important part of our mission. It's one of our core missions from the beginning. we have a strong year. John and the Bureau of Forestry have really laid out goals that we've been able to meet, and my eyes are not picking out the number here. John, do you see it? You got it, okay.
Sure. So we do manage on an ecosystem management basis, right? So we have started doing that type of planning back in the 90s. And basically what we do is we look at a 10-year tranche of years for timber harvests and allocations. We have set a goal each year in that last 10-year cycle of 14,356 acres should be harvested to keep the ecosystem healthy. This past year, we've harvested about a little bit over 16,000 acres. So our harvesting was a little bit more than it was the previous year and a little bit more than our goal or our objective. So you break that type of harvesting down, about 10,000 acres of that is overstory, and that's really where a lot of the good hardwood quality comes from. We did do some shelter wood intermediate cuts, about 6,000 acres, and that is really preparatory. It's like the RX of the forest, right? And we're also doing some timber harvest for salvage from spongy moth kill. And what we try to do there, it's really not planned. The harvests are planned, but the acres are not planned. It's up to the bugs to tell us how many acres we need to harvest. So we've done about 700 acres of salvage this past year.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just one follow-up, if I could, please, sir.
30 seconds.
Do you think we'll be on target for 2026?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Less than that
All right,
for you, sir.
There we go. Thanks, gentlemen. Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, everyone. Hi, this message and this question is for you, Secretary Shirley, around lead testing for children. In my municipalities, I've been getting a lot of questions around, the lead issue, and we have one municipality that actually passed an ordinance, East Lansdowne, and we're working on Upper Darby right now. I know it's also been a question in Lansdowne, but I think some of the smaller boroughs in Lansdowne, the smaller boroughs and municipalities, they're worried about the cost factor of, lead testing in the homes. The one testing, the surveillance testing report, I think it's the childhood lead testing report that came out right around the same time that Act 150 was passed in 2022, states that there was going to be surveillance and there was going to be, keeping documentation on the children who had been tested. Well, that I feel like has not really come forward. I had someone out of the smaller borough that I represent ask me where this test is and where the results are and how that they can get them. So can you tell us if you know what some of the results are and highlight this and how the municipalities can get this information?
So I think the information that you're referring to is probably from providers through doctors, medical providers, and I believe that that's a program that's being operated by the Department of Health. We actually have been working on this issue, specifically lead, through our EJIC, Environmental Justice Interagency Council, which the Department of Health is part of. We've pulled in education, Department of Human Services, a number of different agencies specifically around lead, because Pennsylvania does have very high levels of lead in comparison to the rest of the country. Most of that is attributed to our very old housing stock, and some of it is attributed to lead service lines that deliver drinking water. So we oversee the lead service line replacements through those drinking water systems. And this fall, I'm happy to report that we are the only state in the country that has allocated all of our federal BIL funding for lead service line replacement. So if they give us $1, we're spending $1. And we have received more than $150 million per year for the last 3 years with that special that special pot directed at removing those lead service lines. That does not include plumbing. And unfortunately, this seems to be a pretty big gap, one that I actually personally advocated when the IIJA was being written to include. It must have gotten lost somewhere at the federal level. But it is, I would say, a problem. We do a lot of education around it, particularly we look at brass fixtures. Don't order your plumbing products from like Temu because they likely contain lead. That type of education is something that we do a good bit of.
I really appreciate that because, I know that the Department of Health is included, and really is a big, driver in this work. And I'm happy to know that you all are using that funding the way you're using it. Thank you very much. One of the things that the municipalities really focus on is that lead paint, that chipping in the home. So it comes down to an ordinance that really falls on landlords and folks that are supposed to be, when they, they paint their homes or they remodel or do any type of work in the home, that they should be really looking at that. Is there anything in the budget that you can see from your end that would be something that we could really work on in terms of helping those homeowners or landlords to be able to get this type of work done to meet the ordinance?
So unfortunately, this is part of that gap. Anything within the home really is not something that we oversee, but that is where exposure is coming from. I do think there are some other states that have disclosure requirements whenever there's real estate transactions. I don't think Pennsylvania is one of them, so that could be, one option to have a lead test, a swipe test on paint surfaces. But as far as resources go, no, I do not believe that
I appreciate that and would love to work further with you and your department on it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, secretaries. Thank you for being here today. Earlier today, the good chair from Philadelphia opened up this hearing by discussing issues relating to affordability and grid security and reliability. And I want to touch on those issues a little bit with you, Secretary Shirley. The issue of brownouts and blackouts and the grid potentially shutting down. So what that really means is one day you go to turn on your lights and they don't go on. And it usually occurs, not always, but usually occurs when demand is high, meaning when people need energy the most, when it's very cold or when it's very warm, and it creates a very serious situation. And we have discussed in our caucus for years the potential of this becoming a problem in Pennsylvania. And I'm glad to hear that there's now bipartisan discussion on this topic because it is real and it could be coming. But my concern is that I have not heard from the administration or from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle a plan or a strategy to prevent this from occurring. Meaning, when there is not enough base load energy to meet the demand, that's when you get these brownouts and blackouts. So I want to ask you, what is the administration's strategy? And by base load energy, I mean energy that uses coal and natural gas and nuclear, that always produces and can be ramped up when demand rises. What's the administration's strategy to increasing base load electricity production in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
So I think you guys have been talking about it for a while. I know the Senate has also been talking about it for a while, and we just can't seem to kind of get everybody together to say what are some things that we can do. And I really think that the governor is attempting to do that with his lightning plan, but also with some of the reforms that he has been pushing PJM. So that's kind of, I would say, the unknown, the thing that we have not been able to control or foresee is the way that our grid operator is operating. So we have seen since 2018 the price of natural gas increased 200%. We've seen exports from Pennsylvania increase 59%, which we like to be the #1 electricity exporter, except there's a lot of things going on in the PJM grid that is causing this instability, we'll say, and causing these prices to go up. We've had baseload generation go offline in Maryland and in New York and in New Jersey, which puts further constraints on the baseload generation here in Pennsylvania.
And we've had it go offline here as well, in my district with Bruce Mansfield for various reasons, and of course in Homer City. You mentioned the Lightning Plan. My concern with that plan, and I do appreciate that there is a serious conversation going on about this with the administration and with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But my concern, the Lightning Plan is, I mean, there's a carbon tax within that plan. You're expanding unreliable foreign sources of energy subsidies within that plan with renewables. When are we going to attract Pennsylvania energy to build power plants here using Pennsylvania energy, and how can we do that?
So what I can tell you is there are 2 natural gas-fired power plants in the PJM queue right now to be built in Pennsylvania. We do not have permits in hand for those in Pennsylvania, but we know that they're looking at PJM, which is why the governor has been pushing PJM to essentially fix their queue. We're seeing projects that sit in their queue for 5 years. They screwed up their capacity auction for a number of years. That's what sends price signals to build. So the governor and the governors of the other 12 states, plus the federal government, recently put together a statement of principles for the reforms that they want to see at PJM that makes it easier for baseload generation to be built in Pennsylvania.
I appreciate that. And Secretary Dunn, if I may briefly, so I come from Beaver, Washington County. That's my district. Raccoon State Park is in my district. We had an interesting issue within the state park with fur trapping and with trappings. I had a constituent who was walking their dog, and the dog got caught in a trap, actually. And the dog was walking on a trail or right near a trail. And I talked with your staff some time ago about this, and I wanted to follow up on it to see, is your staff informed me that we were working through a process to change some regulations as it relates to trapping within state parks and near trails, and I was wondering if that was something that you could
We did make an
tell me
adjustment.
about.
Thank you for the call and raising that. So we just, in general, we follow the Game Commission's season and bag limits on game, except we make modifications on state parks where needed. And this was a case based on the incident you called in that we've required them to have 50 feet on either side of a trail for like a 100-foot buffer zone of no trapping near trails to prevent something like that happening again.
Could I get a copy of that regulation, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's a policy, right? It's a policy.
Policy.
We'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for raising the issue.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman, Representative Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, DCNR and DEP, for your time this afternoon, and thank you, of course, for your continued work on behalf of all Pennsylvanian families. In my district in Reading, I hear a lot from working families about the challenges that they face, whether it's having fresh water, whether it's having fresh air, or whether it's keeping lead out of the pipes within their buildings. One of the things that have popped up reoccurrently over the last couple of years is our community's need to getting access to fresh water, and one of those freshwater access points is the Schuylkill River and Schuylkill River Trail, to be specific. The Schuylkill River runs right through the city of Reading. It's literally a part of our identity, and so I'd like to ask you, Secretary Dunn, what's the plan currently to complete the trail on the Schuylkill River and connecting the Reading families to the full trail?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. You know, that connects you with Chair Harris's district as he advocates for the Grays Ferry and continuation of the Schuylkill River Trail. So we work closely with the Schuylkill Heritage Area, a phenomenal heritage area partner. They're both a state and a federal partner. And they have led the way of securing continuation of the trail. So there are a few gaps in the trail, and we work with them. Like when they bring a gap to us, we are often the first funder to secure closing a gap and then continuation. At this point, goes all the way up to Jamie Barton's district.
Yes,
you know,
it does.
There's a piece of it that goes all the way from Reading up through Pottstown and beyond, Pottsville. It connects the two, Pottstown, Pottsville. But there's a gap I'm aware of that's in your area. And then you raise an interesting second question. So getting the neighborhoods down to the Schuylkill. And in the city areas, sometimes it's complicated by roadways and blockages and also just channelization of the stream. And we've encountered that in parts of the Schuylkill and the Philly area. But again, working with partners like Schuylkill River Development Corporation and Schuylkill Heritage, it's a priority for us. I do think as the climate becomes warmer, as more and more people will seek out water and water-based recreation, we make it a priority to find a way to get communities down to the river and access to these great attributes. So you can assume we're all in. Claire's Bureau of Recreation and Conservation has the Community Conservation Partnership grants. I've burned through most of our time probably here, but do you want to say a few words about the grants program and when it opens?
And if you can, very shortly, if you can, because I know we have a little bit amount of time, can you just talk about how exactly you're going to prioritize or help us prioritize those unfinished parts in the city of Reading?
Okay, the Schuylkill River Heritage Area needs to bring it to us during our open grant period, and we will consider that a high priority.
Awesome. So speaking about, we're going to continue on the Schuylkill River because, of course, as you said, you know, folks in my community, they love having access to the river. And even though they don't have it, they like to go through the woods. And colloquially, that part of the city of Reading is called Penske Beach because of our community's insistence in wanting to have access to the Schuylkill River and the waterways. Unfortunately, though, that portion of the Schuylkill River in the city of Reading is highly contaminated due for years of neglect and whatnot. And so this question is specifically for DEP, and I'd love to know, you know, what is DEP's plan? Obviously, I know you all are stretched thin across the Commonwealth, but I'd love to know what is your plan, DEP's plan, to help us here in the city of Reading to clean our waterways and to give the folks of the city of Reading the rightful access to clean water that they deserve.
Yeah, they absolutely deserve to be able to recreate in the water that runs through their city. We have areas like this all over Pennsylvania. I think 37% of our waterways are impaired in some ways, some by acid mine drainage, some by stormwater runoff, some by sewer overflows. We can take a look specifically, but I would say your best asset is going to be the Berks County Conservation District, working with them to devise a plan to eliminate, if it's coming from runoff or if it's coming from stormwater. We have to determine where that impact is coming from and then stop it at its source. It could be any number of things. I don't know off the top of my head where it's coming from, but if it's coming from wastewater, we would have to address it with the wastewater system. If it's coming from stormwater, we would have to implement some significant controls there.
And as we're going into the warmer months, folks within my community are jumping into this polluted water because they want access to these clean waterways. And so anything that either DCNR or DEP can do to help my community get access to fresh water, not just to drink, but also to swim in and recreate in, would be definitely beneficial to my community at large.
If you would invite our team out there with you to see it, we'd be happy to be there.
I'd love to work in collaboration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to both secretaries. A quick shout out to DCNR and all the great work you're doing. I know Secretary Shirley, in the past, we've had some heated exchanges during this appropriations process. And I really want to start out with a big thank you to the efforts and the accomplishments that DEP has been able to work with DCED and accelerating those permits, helping to secure what's a $10 billion natural gas portion of that power plant and taking a blighted community that really had a gut punch and infusing millions of man hours of work. So I want to thank, your department for that. And I do agree, higher standards through equal and can bring accelerated permitting. I think there's really a best management practice we can build on there. Are your plans to continue that sustained success for some of the other data centers? I know some locations maybe in the east carry a lot more controversy, but you mentioned abandoned power plant locations, areas where communities are really wanting it. Can we keep that momentum up for more projects?
Absolutely. I think some locations are very obviously better suited than others, and it makes it a lot easier to develop those sites. For instance, a former coal-fired power plant already has the transmission lines necessary to be able to bring power to the site, so it makes it a lot easier to construct there. We have, a lot of abandoned mine lands across Pennsylvania where, you could situate some of these things. And that is one of the things that I think is going to be on our list of those enhanced environmental targets, that if you are redeveloping a brownfield or, another area, that would, bring you up to that standard of having that expedited permitting.
And I do share some concerns, though, with the governor's grid program. You had mentioned the grid earlier with a previous question and struggles that the grid is having, and kind of that what I would refer to as the road to Hades is paved with good intentions. Some of what we saw during Reggie. Pennsylvania had 5 power plants, acceleration, closure of those coal plants, about 3 million homes, power for 3 million homes was lost. If we create another policy with higher standards, those data centers could just, they could just invest in Maryland or in other states and, suck up the power. Like, how is the DEP working to hold accountable our neighboring states? You had mentioned earlier, we're exporting 59%. We had a 59% increase in exports. So if we look at Maryland and their policies and plant closures, and New Jersey, Maryland's taking 40% of their power from us. New Jersey's 35. So why pick or target additional standards on our data centers when we're already winning? Why not let's look at, targeting some of our neighboring states that are really a much larger cause of increased prices because they're just sucking all our power.
Yeah, I don't think it's a targeting of data centers as it's so much of making sure that they are not unduly impacting the people that live here through increased rates. So there's a number of ways that data centers increase the rates of Pennsylvania consumers. Not just on the basic supply and demand, but any type of infrastructure right now, transmission infrastructure, typically gets spread across ratepayers. So if they need big transmission lines run to their facility, that's getting spread across all of the ratepayers in that.
And I think there's some big transmission lines being expanded into Maryland as well that are causing some eminent domain issues. Yeah. And I want to shift gears because I know my time is limited a little bit over onto concerns that we've heard from the waste coal industry about HB 501, the press plan, and that, the coal producers are very concerned the Tier 2 changes could really negatively affect waste coal generation. Can you touch on that? Because we're starting to get some good momentum. We closed the borders. They're eating up waste coal, but this might bring a halt to it.
So I think that's a conversation we need to take a really hard look at, because I think the numbers actually tell a different story. When you look at AEPS alone, since 2021, the solar credits have decreased by 30%, but the Tier 2, mostly waste coal credits, have increased by 476%. And then they're projected to jump even higher this year and next year. So the amount of AEPS credits that are flowing into waste coal right now are significant. Plus the tax credits that they receive. I would have to take a hard look at their math, but we're seeing different data, and the numbers that I gave you came actually from the Independent Fiscal Office. They put out a report about 2 weeks ago that referenced this.
Sure, it'd be great to have that conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, secretaries. It's great to see you. I actually have, I'm going to leave stormwater alone this year, Madam Secretary. And I'm going to focus on DCNR. And really want to say kudos. Our community, in my district, we've been the recipients of grants for recreation in I believe all of Pembroke, Lower Paxton and Susquehanna Township, and we do thank you for those. But I did want to talk to or ask you today about maybe our ability and what the department would do if we were able to invest more and up the $250,000 cap on recreation grants. How many more projects could you do? I'm sure the demand right now far outweighs DCNR's ability to fund projects. So if we were to be able to do that and invest more, what would DCNR do with it, and how could you enhance communities even further?
Right. I just want to thank you for your partnership, and we've seen tremendous uptake of the surrounding communities here in Harrisburg with our grants program. I'm going to give Claire a chance to talk. She hasn't had a chance to talk yet. She's so enthusiastic about the grants program in her bureau.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And we would certainly like to see some additional funding because, as you noted, every year the demand for grants outstrips what we can fund. We typically can fund anywhere from 60 to 70% of the demand. And as costs go up, that $250,000 cap, we have caps on many of our programs. That means that those dollars don't go as far. Right. So, so what we would do if we were able to do that, if we were able to have additional funding, we are currently in the middle of a work within the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation to look at where our grants are going, who's successful at getting grants, who's not successful at getting grants, where the gaps are, who's applying, who's not applying. We would really like to extend our reach into communities that we have not engaged with historically. Right. So that's one area of expansion. And then certainly raising the cap so that communities that do get awards can push those dollars further.
Yeah, and I think part of what exacerbates it, this is pure speculation, but I think because it is a match program,
yes,
it does rely on a local municipality's ability to invest as well. So, and again, in my district, we have made that investment because it's really important to our constituents that recreation be available. So, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and on the match front, we recognize that that's a challenge for many local municipalities, and that's a barrier for entry for especially our smaller or less wealthy municipalities. And some of that match requirement is written into the legislation. Yeah. So, so additional funding from new sources that could lower the match requirement would certainly help our dollars go further. Yeah, and help us reach more communities.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the rising costs too, because even we've our local recreation directors have had to sort of scale back or reimagine projects that we did have an allocation for just because of the rising costs of materials and production and things like that.
Yeah.
So. Did you have something, Secretary?
No, just the grant round's open now.
Yeah, it closes April 30th.
Excellent, yeah.
So encourage your communities, everyone, to take a look at the C2P2 grants program and apply. And Claire's staff provides technical assistance as well. So if it's a community that's never applied and just needs a helping hand, our staff are great at really helping them connect the dots.
Yeah, again, I just want to conclude by saying I really appreciate DCNR's commitment to active and passive recreation across the Commonwealth. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll direct my remarks to the DEP. First of all, thank you, Secretary Shirley, for the great job you do. Very grateful to the dedicated staff of the DEP, and nothing I say today should be interpreted as denigrating their fine work. Environmental laws and regulations are meaningless unless they are enforced, and unfortunately, the Department of Environmental Protection does not have the staff to do its job well right now. Your staff right now is 327 people less than it was in 2002. And since that time, your workload has increased with the advent of regulating the oil and gas industry, the emergence of PFAS, more complicated federal regulations with regard to the air, and so forth. You simply don't have the boots on the ground to do the job as well as it should be done. With regard to the oil and gas program, you're down to about 178 positions. Back in 2015, you were at 226 positions. Recently, former Secretary Quigley said you should have more than 300 positions in this program. And not surprisingly, gas wells are routinely being abandoned. Data is not being reported as required by conventional drillers, and brine is being illegally spread on gravel roads. With regard to the water program, unfortunately, you only have the staffing to inspect streams once every 30 years. Your staff told me that you need at least 12 more people to get that down to every 10 years, as it should be. As you previously mentioned, 37% of Pennsylvania's stream miles are impaired in some way. With regard to your air program, you are down 86 positions since 2005. And according to your air personnel, your workload has increased from 30 to 50% in the last 2 decades. This is evidenced by decline in air monitors and so forth. HASCA, your staff has indicated you are 13 positions below your intended capacity. Your staff has indicated they do not have an estimate of the number of hazardous sites in Pennsylvania, and there are 21 fixed fire training facilities suspected of PFAS, which HASCA has not investigated. So my real question is, well, and I will say this: the governor has really placed great importance on permit turnaround time. But I just don't see that same urgency as far as personnel to enforce environmental laws. So my real question to you is, what can you do to educate the public as to the needs of the Department of Environmental Protection in enforcing environmental laws? And what can you do to emphasize to the governor the state our Department of Environmental Protection is in?
Thank you for that question. I just want to say, since the beginning of the Shapiro administration, the department has received an additional 369 positions. So what is that, 3 years, 369 positions? That's over 10% increase in 3 years. So we are increasing our complement where we see necessary to do so. Since 2002, we've also had significant technological upgrades that have made us a lot more efficient. We've gotten a lot better at our testing capabilities. And we're doing our stream testing quicker and better. And we have more aquatic biologists now than we have in the history of DEP doing that work. So we do have resources to be able to do the work. We also completed 117,000 inspections last year. We did about 40,000 permits. We did almost 3 times as many inspections as we did permits. So we do have boots on the ground. We are out there finding issues, but our goal is compliance. So we try to bring those sites back into compliance and make sure that those issues never occur. As far as education goes, we do have, I would say, a robust effort underway right now at thinking about how we communicate, how we educate the public, because a lot of folks, they really do take it for granted. They don't understand where their water comes from. They don't understand the importance of surface water. They don't understand electricity until they get a bill. And I think that we recently established an Office of External Affairs to work with local governments, and they oversee our Office of Environmental Education to help get that message out to folks about the work that we do and what its importance is.
But the metrics of performance are just not there. Your streams aren't being inspected previously enough. Wells are being abandoned routinely, according to your own reports. HASCA can't identify, can't investigate sites they know there's a problem. They have told me they are down 13 positions in HASCA. The air people have told me they are down. They need 12 more people to do the adequate inspections. The oil and gas people simply can't enforce the laws. The metrics of performance, despite the increase in technology, the metrics of performance are simply not there.
We have metrics that say differently.
Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes Representative Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you. Thank you all again for being here this afternoon. I want to echo my colleagues' comments earlier about gratitude for the help with the Homer City project, Secretary Shirley and your team. But I want to emphasize, though, that just because, it has been fast-tracked doesn't mean any corners were cut. And you mentioned coming in at the ceiling and coming in at the floor, and I believe the Homer City redevelopment folks come in at the ceiling because they definitely crossed their T's and dotted their I's. But I do appreciate the help and support for that because it is a project that will benefit not only my district in Indiana County, but the entire Western Pennsylvania region and this entire Commonwealth and the grid itself. So thank you. I have a couple of follow-up questions, but before I get to those, Chairman Warner had to leave for another meeting. He has a couple of questions pertaining to the ATV program for Secretary Dunn. I will give these to you, but we would like a response then in writing, and I'll hand this to you when we're finished. So my first initial follow-ups for Secretary Dunn. Rep. Barton mentioned, and I believe you confirmed, you're currently managing about 40 stream bed non-surface impact natural gas leases. Is that correct? Okay. These leases in which there is no impact at the surface or disturbance of the resource, these are leases where there is no impact at the surface or disturbance of the resource above, but the resource development is able to be conducted efficiently while deriving revenues for the Commonwealth, right? And then later, Rep. DeVanzo asked about revisiting the moratorium to consider leases in which the surface is not impacted, and the state can benefit from the revenue generated from this activity that is happening in the vicinity of state lands anyway. Your answer, if I recall what you said, was that you feel there is enough development on state lands already. That's correct. Are there instances then in which the department's refusal to enter into a non-surface impact natural gas lease has caused a neighboring well pad on private lands to leave orphan gas under state lands, losing revenue for the state while increasing the likelihood of the need for additional well pads later?
I'm not aware of any instance like that. Are you, John?
Here's a microphone, Secretary.
I'm sorry, no, I have not heard of an instance where that's happened yet.
Is that something you could look into and get back to us on? Because from what I've heard, there are a lot of opportunities out there to access these wells or use the existing pads to access these sites to generate additional revenue for this Commonwealth. I've even heard figures up in the range of $250 million if we were to allow greater access. And at a time when we're looking at revenues the governor's proposed, draining the rainy day fund, draining our surplus to balance the revenue proposal, I think we should be looking at every mechanism possible to increase state revenue. So if you could get back to us on the actual figures.
Oh, I think I misunderstood your point when you first asked it. Yeah, one reason that so if you look at the block of forest lands that we have and the matrix of forest land that they're in, that there's a balance of activities. And while you think about the well pad as being the disturbance area, and in fact, it really disturbs the core forest for a much greater area. And so we're balancing the forest land for everything from recreation to clean air to climate resiliency to natural gas. We have in recreation, we're balancing all these parts, and there's a lot of natural gas development on state forest lands right now. So it's just that balancing equation and trying to keep the resiliency of that forest matrix intact. Because every, like the forest, the gas development has led to I think I read about 30,000 acres of loss of core forest land. It just changes the nature of the forest where you have the pipelines, the water systems, et cetera, in the whole surrounding area. But yeah, happy to get the stats back.
Yeah, because it's my understanding
Yep.
that we could access additional resources without having to put in new pads if it were to be allowed. So I would like that follow-up.
No, I'm sure there are instances that that's the case.
Yes,
But,
okay.
then you have the other factors that I mentioned.
All right. And then Secretary Shirley, very, very quickly as to Representative Coots's questions related to the permit backlog. Can you tell us how many permits are still currently backlogged?
Thanks. We actually cleared the backlog.
Okay.
I want to say back in October. So we had about 2,400 permits that were basically sitting on a pile that was a result of being incomplete under the permit decision guarantee policy. So that was the policy that preempted the payback program. So if a permit came in the door, if it was complete, it was afforded a timeline. If it was incomplete, it basically was kicked out of the permit decision guarantee, and we got to it when we got to it. We actually challenged our staff to eliminate that permit backlog 10% a month, knowing that there were some incredibly challenging permits that were sitting on that backlog. It took us a little longer than we would have liked, but we continued to push and keep our foot on the gas to eliminate, whether it meant denying permits or working with the applicants to make sure that we were getting the appropriate information that we were waiting for. We were able to clear that backlog this year.
So there's no backlog of any kind for any type?
There's not. There's a queue, right? So a permit comes in and it waits in line, and we're working on it. We might be having some back and forth with the consultant or the applicant on it. So they might be somewhere in the queue, but it's moving. And then you have the speed program, which allows an applicant to bypass the queue and use a qualified professional. But of course, they have to pay for that.
All right. Well, I think that's good news to hear. I know that we've met several times on the permitting issue, so I appreciate your efforts, your staff efforts to try and expedite those processes. We need to continue to move in that direction to make sure that outside industries know Pennsylvania is open and ready for business. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen, and we thank you both for being here. We thank our Secretary of DEP and DCNR for being with us today for this budget hearing. We are going to take a 15-minute recess, and then we'll be back at 3:30 to conclude today's budget hearings with the judiciary. So we'll be back at 3:30 to talk to our members of the judiciary. Thanks, everybody.